As we allow others to get on, as we know it's lunchtime, we just want to get started. So we be mindful of the time as well as your lunchtime. This is our first Scale Up Power Hour featured by Trivium Corporate Services. And just want to tell you a little bit about Scale Up, which is an initiative under Greater Milwaukee Committee. And Scale Up is about economic development and transforming growth. And through that, we have accelerator programs and events. And our events consist of networking events, boot camps, roundtables, and of course, this new opportunity, which is Power Hour. And we're presenting this to you today in order just to give you guys a conversation and bring in an expert from various topics. And you guys can participate and ask as many questions as possible, kind of our thing of an office hours. So we ask that you guys ask as many questions as possible, get a lot of information, and be open to the information that is being given to you. So we're excited for this event. We're excited for the things that are to come with Scale Up. We're also recruiting now for Spark 8, which is an accelerator of ours that is for businesses under $1 million. Black, Brown, Hispanic, Latinx, and women-owned companies. And we'll have that information in the chat for you for any more information about not only the accelerator programs, events, but also our membership as well coming into Scale Up. And now I'll pass it to Scott, who is the VP of Development and Customer Service.
Thanks, Sean. I want to thank Scale Up for having us in today. I want to thank everyone for joining. I'll do a quick intro of Trivium, and I'll turn over to Sonia, who's the star of the show. So Trivium, put simply, we help companies scale. We have clients who are large, clients who are small, all sorts of industries, manufacturing, healthcare, food service, tech, all kinds of industries. Our focus is on back office support, which includes accounting, finance, human resources, and tax, all the things that take up a lot of time sometimes and may not be in an entrepreneur and a founder's initial thoughts, but are very, very important. Today, we're going to talk about recruiting and retention. We do a significant amount of this for our clients, both on a consulting aspect and a recruiting aspect. Sonia heads this for our team here. She'll get into her experience in a bit. I'm located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Trivium itself is headquartered in California. I'm currently in our headquarters today, but for the folks in Milwaukee, I'll see you guys around town. I'll be around and going to Scale Up events. So if you see me, come say hello. During the course of the talk today, please ask questions, raise your hand, put them in chat. Sonia will speak for about 20 or 30 minutes. We'll open it up for Q&A after that for another 30 minutes. So feel free to ask very specific questions about your company if you're comfortable. But while she's talking, put them in chat, use the hand raise function. This is a discussion and it's for you. So please take advantage of it and hope you guys learn. So with that, Sonia, throw it to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today during your lunchtime. As Scott said, Trivium does all kinds of infrastructure support for lots of startup companies, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Today, I'd like to share with you some things that I have been learning. I am part of the HR team and run the recruiting and the HR practice for a number of our clients. And so I have a lot of data around things that I think would be interesting to you. I'm not going to go through all of the information, but these slides will be available to you when our meeting is over, so you can go through and dig a little deeper. And you're always welcome to reach out to us if you want any help with anything that we've discussed today. So let's get started. Can everybody see my slides? Yeah.
Yep, looks great.
Presentation mode. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So I want to talk to you about some trends to begin with. And I know that we're at all different places in our size of company, in what we're learning to do. Rochelle, you shared at the beginning that you're just starting and you don't know what you don't know yet. So this is going to be a little bit of background information on just recruiting today. And then I'm going to get a little bit deeper into the retention aspect of keeping people, because recruiting is just the first step. In today's environment, we've got some really interesting trends as all of us have lived through COVID. And we went from, many companies and jobs saying, oh, you've got to be in the office, to all of a sudden recognizing that people can work remotely, that there's a lot of stuff that's going on that will allow productivity to be even higher. So it's a really, really interesting time for people who are trying to hire employees to come and work for their roles. So, one of the big things that is really, really prevalent out there in Silicon Valley and many of the other companies that have tech is that we now all of a sudden have a global platform again to hire people from. So that might not be relevant to everybody, but what it actually does do is create pressure even on people who need to hire locally, because there's a global market that is that's pulling talent from no matter where you guys are. We're also hearing over and over again that there's a talent shortage, and it's a pretty significant talent shortage. We've been talking about it for a while, but one of the things that COVID did was a lot of people learned to live on less at home, and many of them have decided that they don't want to come back into the rat race. They don't want to come back and work the way that they did before. So that's also created a new kind of challenge that we didn't have before. And I'm going to speak a little bit about how the employee profiles have changed when we get to retention, but it's also added to that retention challenge, even if you do get them in the door. A lot of you have heard about the Great Resignation. When we went remote, there was a thing called leveling the playing field in hiring people. And so all of a sudden, you could be working at Google and be living at home instead of having to go into the office. So a lot of companies that said they would never hire remotely, all of a sudden learned that they had to. And so it created a big movement in employees that were in the workforce that you wouldn't have expected before, because now it didn't matter where you were located. For example, we were talking at the beginning of this meeting, I'm in California, there are folks in Milwaukee, there are people all over the place on this call, and kind of Zoom has leveled the playing field and it's become everybody's new office. So there were a lot of people moving roles and just ridiculous, job offers going back and forth that came out as COVID has started to kind of normalize, because obviously COVID is not over. For anybody who thinks that it is, just understand how many people are getting it right now. We just had an executive meeting just canceled because half of the executive team got COVID over the weekend. And I just learned before this meeting, my daughter got COVID while she was at her horse races earlier in the weekend. So yeah, it's not over, but yeah, it has normalized a lot of things that has made it even harder for us to hire. Lots of emerging markets that we never thought about because of this. And there's really a shift, to hire for teachability and agility. So as you're thinking about, how you're hiring people, one of the things that you really want to think about now with today's environment is how willing is somebody to learn? How good are they at learning? And having to figure out how to do it remotely becomes, another part of the challenge that we all want to make sure that we're paying attention to as we hire people into our organizations. The other thing is attracting people. How do we really attract good people? Before, it used to be that people were looking for jobs. Today, what we're really looking for is almost a marketing pitch for your company and the job that you're hiring people into. It really requires it to be like something that's attracting people versus just saying, oh, I've got this job and there's all these folks out there that want to join a company or are looking for a job. It's not like that. It's really an employee's market today. So you need to be smart about how your job descriptions are written and how you're trying to attract people to your businesses. And in the next few years, and it has been actually a growing trend, but it continues to be a trend. I don't think there's a single company that I work with, and I'm sure, Scott, you would be able to say the same thing, that doesn't want to that isn't talking about making diversity hires, right? So what does that mean? And what does diversity look like? And usually what companies are talking about is they'd like their workforce to reflect their customer base. We're looking for diversity hires. But really, that focus on diversity, a lot of companies don't know how to recruit for diversity or how to make diversity an exciting thing as part of your company to draw people in. So those are a few of the trends. There's a couple more I just want to bring up really quickly. What recruiting organizations need to do. So if you have a recruiting organization, or you are the recruiting organization in your, in your company, it's really important to think about how you proactively engage candidates and how quickly you are hiring people. It's very, very important to shorten the recruiting cycle. One of the biggest complaints I hear from folks is it takes a long time to hire someone. And if you're not really like keeping that candidate engaged, we talk about employee engagement, but now there's a whole concept of candidate engagement that's really important for you to be thinking about, because it's not just your existing employees that are that need to be feeling connected to the organization. It's also the folks that you're bringing in through the employee process. Have any of you lost an employee, lost a candidate during the hiring process because they found another job? Have any of you had that experience?
I'd say that happens a lot. I'd say that happens a lot. Yep.
Yeah, and part of that is because there is so much competition, and we really want to make sure that you're connecting with that candidate right from the beginning. So you're kind of creating this marketing pitch. You're being really, really intentional about how often you are engaging that candidate during the process, and how proactive your recruiting teams are being. Very important for you to be able to do that today. And you're nurturing your pipeline. So that's kind of the same thing. We're making sure that as we've got a pipeline of people that we're bringing in. So for example, if you're hiring a customer success person for your team, you're not just hiring one person. You want to make sure that you're really intentional about keeping a pipeline of people ready and warm and ready to go when you need to fill those jobs, so you're not losing any traction in hiring folks. So the other thing is that you really want to make sure that your hiring managers and your people are really clear about your company culture. One of the things that I always tell my executives and my managers and my teammates that I work with is the culture always wins. Be very realistic when you're hiring people. Tell them what it's like inside your organization. Share with them honestly, what the culture is, what your work hours are. If you're trying to make your place look more attractive than it really is, people are going to find out once they get there. And if you're trying to change your culture, be very intentional about being clear as to why you're changing it, because the culture always wins. There's nothing worse than joining a company you think you're joining and finding out once you get there that it's not what you thought it was. So I really want you to remember, if you take away one thing from this recruiting component of what we're just talking about, is that the culture always wins. Let's make sure that we align who we're bringing in with the culture that you truly have in your organization. And if you need help figuring out what that culture is, it's worth investing the time to do that, because turnover is super expensive, and it's also very disruptive for your organization. So I want to just take a little breath here and see if there are any questions or anything that you guys want to ask about this before I move on to, I'm going to be moving on in a second to retention.
Yes, Sonia, there's a question from Mike on culture. He's asking, what are the best ways to maintain your culture with newly hired remote workers or newly remote workers?
That's great. That's a great question, Mike. Thanks for asking that. So there's a number of things that we can do to help maintain your culture, even remotely. So one of the things, I know it feels a little kind of hokey or, expensive, or depending on what your budgets are, we can do it with funds and without funds. But if, for example, it's important in your office to connect with people and you did things together, before. One of the things that several of my companies have done is we'll schedule a lunch and we'll send all of our employees like a DoorDash. So people can continue to have that meeting and that face-to-face and ask everybody to bring lunch and have lunch together. There's a number of like cultural norms that you should identify that your company had potentially before we all went remote, and think about how you can continue to engage a remote workforce with those cultural norms. So for example, I have a company that used to do Olympics. When they were in the office together, everybody would get together and there was an Olympics that they did. And, you know, we built teams and did all kinds of things like that. And with this company, when we went remote and literally everybody went remote, we found a way to do a Zoom Olympics. So we had different activities. We gave people small budgets. It's not very expensive to go out and buy certain things if they were on certain teams. And we would have everybody together, have teams rooting for each other. So there's lots of ways to keep that engagement going that aren't extremely expensive, but you need to be very intentional about it so you don't lose what's important to your culture. One of the other things about culture that I also want us to, I mentioned it briefly, but I want you to really, you know, hear me carefully around it, is be realistic with people that you're hiring about what your culture is. One of the things that I've seen with a couple of my companies is we try to sell our company a lot during the interview process. And then when people come inside, it's not exactly what they were told. And it becomes, you know, it becomes disheartening to them. And it's important that we're really honest about that, because we don't want to lose people after the fact. Because again, as I said, recruiting is very expensive. Did I answer your question, Mike? Sorry. Scott?
Yeah, I think you did. Thank you.
Great. And one more question, Sonia, before I move on to the next. I think Nastasia has her hand raised.
Yes, I
Okay.
do. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
So I like what you said about like talking about like the company culture, but like, because I'm guessing that because you do recruitment for a lot of businesses.
I do.
Okay, so like when you meet with the owner or the leadership team, like do you kind of go over with them about like what the culture looks like for them?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Yeah, I always ask not just the leadership, but I always make it a point to talk to the hiring manager as well, because as those of you who've worked in larger organizations know, there might be like an overall company culture, right? So we're saying, okay, this is the culture of our company. Here are our values, our mission, vision. But then you also know that within teams, there are cultures. Now, that's not ideal, but it's reality, right? So it's really important to make sure that when you're putting a position together, when you are, you know, looking at how you're going to attract somebody to an organization, you're very realistic about the company culture as well as the team and manager culture that they're going into. So yeah, we have specific questions that we put together and we ask when we're building out a job description, because that is part of what we want to make sure we cover.
Okay, I like that a lot. And so, like, do you kind of help the hire managers too to kind of coach them to prepare for when they do need to do the interviews?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
my gosh. Yeah. Interview training is one of the big spaces that Trivium and I spend my time. In fact, I just was on a call this morning with a leadership team, and that is one of the first things that they talked to me about, was making sure that, you know, it's kind of an overall under manager training, but it's usually like the number one or number two thing that they want to see on a manager training, you know, profile or platform that we're going to help build for them.
Okay, awesome. I like that a lot. I'll be reaching out to you.
Oh, great. I'd love it. Look forward to it. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
These are great questions, by the way. And thank you for making this interactive, because it's no fun to hear myself speak and I can't see any of your faces. So I'd love to have your questions and interruptions.
Doing great, Sonia. Doing great.
Oh, thanks. So one of the other things that's really important, and I touched on this a little bit before, but speed to placement is super important. We are seeing more candidates lost during the offer process than ever in my career. And I've been in HR longer than I'm willing to talk about on this call, because then I'll need therapy. But it definitely is something that we're seeing. So, finding the right people is hard enough, but once you find them, gosh, let's get them to offer and let's get them working as soon as you can, because it's really, really important that we don't lose that momentum once we've got them excited. Nobody looks better, not the company or the candidate, than when you're in the offer process. Okay, so let's make sure that we get them closed and keep things moving. One of the other things that, that also relates back to culture is doing behavioral assessments. We're seeing more and more of this. Scott and I are being asked to do more and more of this during the interview process. So there are actually behavioral assessments that will help you understand how people think and will react, what their behaviors are before you even bring them onto your team. Now, you have to be very careful in how you use and administer these so you don't create any adverse impact with all that diversity you're going to be hiring, as well as your existing workforce. But this is also a way that ensures a better hire for you. You've got another layer of vetting, and it's also something that has been used in several of our companies as a coaching tool after people have been brought on to create higher performing teams. So that's also something that you can think about when you are hiring, especially at the executive level. This makes a big, big difference. And of course, DE&I talked a little bit about that earlier, but over the next few years, you're going to continue to see this as something that is going to be not just a requirement to feel complete in your hiring processes, but I'm getting a lot of candidates asking about when I'm when I'm hiring for companies, what is their DE&I policy? What are the things they have in place to create inclusion, no matter where a person comes from or what their natural orientation is. And so this is a very, very important thing for you to be thinking about as you're putting your hiring strategy together, as well as your company culture. Any questions on that? Those are some big things.
Hey, Sonia, this is Mike again. What analysis tools do you use for the, I'm familiar with DISC reports. Which ones do you favor?
My favorite one is called an AVA. It's actually the originator that DISC came from. Okay, so DISC is a great tool. AVA is actually a little bit more accurate. It's actually quite a bit more accurate than DISC, and it's where DISC originated. So it's kind of the big gorilla in it, and it's actually very inexpensive to do an assessment, and it's a really, really good assessment. And we use it from hiring to promoting to coaching to developing. It's a tool that's used for all of those things inside your organization.
Yeah, we actually just did AVA internally at Trivium. Sonia led us through this process in February of this year.
Yes,
Really,
we used
really
it as part of our team, and we've done some realignment based on people's natural behavioral tendencies. Thanks, Scott. That's a great reminder. We've done some actual work realignment because, people were able to be really open all of a sudden because you've created a level playing field for folks to talk about behaviors instead of personality, right? Or behaviors instead of what people like or don't like to do. And so we've done realignment even inside our own company, using our tools to help us be a better teammate and a better company.
I could say for a fact that I was part of that evaluation for the tool internally, and I gotta say that it totally turned the way that we had our internal conversations. It went from everyone arguing and chatting behind people's backs. Not everyone, I'm just saying the culture went from like secrecy to just wide openness, and it seemed, it's kind of like joining a hippie commune afterwards, where everyone's just so excited to talk to each other all the time, even remotely. And I feel like it's probably one of the most important things that our company did in the last year was taking that AVA.
Yeah, and I think Nathan is pointing out. So Nathan is has been with the company. I've been with Trivium 11 years. I guess I didn't state that. Nathan, you've been with the company almost as long as I have, haven't you? Like, aren't we about the same tenure almost?
Yeah. In fact, yeah, speaking about recruiting earlier, I was going to join Apple as their video producer, and I was on their final round of hiring when Trivium picked me up, because they were much more straightforward in the hiring process. They were, very interactive versus reactive. And I think that, once I joined Trivium, then Apple made their final offer to me, and it was, obviously it's Apple bucks and Apple benefits, but I felt like I would just be in a vacuum over there versus, the family vibe that I picked up firsthand from just being in the office with Trivium for the first couple of weeks there.
Yeah,
and I've been there for years.
yeah, I remember when we hired Nathan, so that's why I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, so it's actually a tremendously helpful tool. I have one of our larger companies that Trivium supports today. The executive team is doing an offsite this week, and we did the whole team AVA last year at the executive team offsite, and they bring up their profiles before every meeting. So they understand how best to communicate with each other. So that's how effective that the tool has been for them. It's actually completely changed their ability to hit their numbers. So Mike, that's a really good question. Obviously, we have a lot of passion around it because our job is to help successful companies be even more successful. And this is one of the ways that we do it.
Awesome. I just signed up for a free demo online, so we're all good.
Yeah. And if you just let them know that Sonia Clark and Trivium referred you, that will be really helpful for you as well as them. Again, a side story is that when I actually became certified with AVA, I was at Black & Decker, and now my boss's boss's boss is the guy who runs the AVA group. That's how much he believed in it. So it's a very effective tool. Okay, let's get to retention so I can get you guys through. And I know this is probably what you really care about. So, now that we've spent all this time, this money, doing this retention, this hiring stuff, we're done, right? Our job is over. We've got them in the door, and we all know that that's not true. So how do we keep them? How do we make sure that retention is where the turnover happens if you can't retain people, right? So it's a really, really important part of our thinking that can't stop once we bring people into the organization. So one of my other favorite sayings is, if you guys come and work with us, you'll hear me say these things over and over again. So the culture always wins is the number one. And the second one is people leave managers, not companies. And please don't underestimate that. It's really, really important for you to recognize that as we are busy and we're growing fast and we're promoting people, beyond their level of skill at the moment when you promote them, which is fine as long as we've got the plan to get them up to speed. And some people should never be people managers, no matter what they are asking for. And all of us have worked for those people in our past lives. So let's not make the same mistake again. But yeah, really keep that in mind. People leave managers, not companies. One of the things I always do when I come into an organization is I take a look at turnover reports by manager, because it tells me more than almost anything else in the organization. It tells me where I have to help first and, and the most. And it's usually very, very evident, the managers that lose people. The other thing I'm going to talk a little bit more about is employee expectations are changing. It's not the same world that many of us grew up in, and people are looking for different things. COVID pushed some of it over, but there's a generation that they're looking for a different type of interaction with their companies, and I think it's really important for you to be aware of it. Mental health used to be a bad word, or it was actually like buried word. Nobody talked about people's mental health in the workspace, but it's actually one of the main things that employees are potential employees are looking for. They want to know our company's mental health policies. I'm hearing the question more and more on what we do around creating work-life balance for people coming into an organization where that used to be an unheard of discussion. And people are deciding not to join companies because they're not getting the answers they want to hear. Employee engagement is super important. I'm sure many of you are working on those things or have been in organizations that did. So we'd love to hear a little bit from you on what you guys have done and what's effective. And then share some of the things that we're doing. Investing in technology to increase employee productivity is another really important one. You know, now that we are remote, people need different tools at home than they did before. And so it's really important for a company, CEOs, you know, COOs, for you guys to have that in your budget and be thinking about what do my people at home need, and what am I willing to be able to write off when, you know, if things change. It's really important for you to be thinking about technology and integrated technology approaches to things, and providing opportunities for people to contribute beyond their usual responsibilities. This kind of goes back to employee expectations, but having, you know, socially responsible missions, giving employees time to do socially responsible things. Again, another big ask that I'm starting to see that people are really looking for when they join your organizations. Any questions on this slide? I'm going to get a little deeper into some of these things. Good. All right, keep going. So here we go. So there was a time when we would hire people, and maybe we were even in this, you know, time where it was, as hiring a person was a transactional process, right? We were looking at people, we had a head to fill. It was an individual job that we filled one at a time, tactical. There, you know, here's the company, you're lucky to have a job, come on board, you know, we're going to give you your salary, your benefits, your vacation, maybe. And that's just kind of what people expected. We have now moved to a brave new world of employee expectations, and we need to be really aware of this. I mean, people have choices, and the choices that they're making are to go to relationship-based companies. You heard Nathan, you know, 11 years ago talk about, 11 or 10 years ago, talk about how Apple was very transactional in the way that they dealt with him, and how he chose Trivium because we weren't, and we were a relationship-based company. Our founder talks about relationships over anything else that we do. And for me, that's been one of my greatest learnings as a leader and as part of the Trivium team. And it's probably why I never have left them as many times as people have asked me to do something different, is because that relationship is so important. So we value relationships at Trivium even over, you know, financials. You know, we value it over customer decisions. And so that's something we live and in our values, and it's something that really makes us an employer of choice. It differentiates us with the people who join our team. And the other things that people will look for, it's, you know, they're asking, as I already mentioned, work-life balance. They want to know what the organizational values are. They want to know what the manager's normal behaviors are. For the first time in my career in years, I'm getting specific manager questions, as I mentioned earlier, really understanding that about the people who you're hiring into. a sense of belonging. Oh, and Mike, just so you know, if you use that tool, that AVA tool, you can actually map a manager's natural behavioral tendencies, and you can look at the tendencies on that manager's team, and you can help hire it to complement those tendencies, because, you know, our managers do tend to hire in their own image. And so you're going to get a whole lot of the same when people are hiring without a plan. And so this relationship component where you allow managers to think about all the pieces they need is a really, really important piece of creating that sense of belonging on the team and being open to different styles. Having care and trusting colleagues, potential for advancement, your career development has always been a long time question that people ask when you're hiring them. So having a good idea of what the plan is going to be for them is super important. Of course, you know, working from home, having flexible work schedules, and, you know, making sure that people are aligned, that people's values are aligned with the organization's values. Really, really important point that gets missed a lot of times, because we're hiring for technology, we're hiring for skills, and not really looking at, you know, people's own values and making sure they're aligned before we hire them into our organization. That misalignment will be one of the loudest and most uncomfortable things when you're dealing with performance issues afterwards. Questions? I saw something else come up in the chat, but I can't read it.
Oh, it was a comment from Nathan.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's just me agreeing with you.
Okay. Oh, thanks,
Yeah.
Nathan. I love having Nathan on my calls. I just feel so smart when he's around.
That's right. You could hire me too if you want to be on your calls.
Oh, that's right. This just gives you a little bit more of, you know, that expands the conversation. And we call it this is called a model of investment on how we look at total compensation. So total compensation is that whole feeling of being in your organization. So I'll give you an example. It's not something that you always will talk about, but when we went remote, you know, there's kind of this money, the monetary, here's your salary, you know, here's your professional growth, here's the employee experience we want to create for you, and here's life experiences. So half of this is transactional, right? So the money and how your career is going to go, that's going to be, you know, a more transactional way of thinking about things. Relationship is the professional growth. I'm going to help you build that up. I'm going to create a great employee experience. There's a collective community that happens as you look at life experiences and employee experiences. Your team helps you, you know, reach out. It helps you guys build that together. And then you've got kind of this individual growth that happens here, where it's monetary and professional growth, and you expect your salaries to increase as well as you climb that ladder. But then there's all these other intangibles that we don't talk about in total compensation, like the cost of benefits, the changing benefits that we're going to be putting into some of our workplaces. When we went remote, one of the benefits that all of a sudden showed up at a lot of companies that I interact with was a work from home bonus. Okay, to help people create a home office that they didn't have before. Some states actually have a statutory requirement which a lot of companies don't know about, California being one of them, that if you require an employee to use home internet or home services that they have to pay for, there has to be a partial reimbursement for those things. So all of those things go into total compensation, and that also equals culture, right? So when you were in the office and tech companies were serving lunches every day or had snacks available, that is also part of total compensation. When we went home, what did we do to offset that? Well, some of my companies created a monthly stipend to allow employees to continue to do things like, have lunches together and have snacks, or have a budget set aside for, like I had mentioned earlier in the call, a weekly luncheon where you brought everybody together and you send everybody a Grubhub or a DoorDash so they could order their lunches. So that is all included in total compensation as you think about what compensation looks like today. We just have to be a lot more creative about it. I know this is a little bit of a concept slide here, so if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to expand on this a little bit more. No? We're good?
I also have like a comment. When things shifted to remote, that right side probably
right
changed a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just- It changed so fast for everyone. So I guess knowing that as employers and just redefining what your employee life experience is now versus what it was a couple of years ago, I think that's probably important.
Really, really, yeah, good point, Scott. That's a very, very important point to think about. And as people keep thinking that COVID is going to be over and we're going to be back to the way we used to be, that's going to be a very small percentage of people. There, more and more CEOs that I talk to, we have real estate, and people are just making choices to stay remote and not go back into an office situation for so many reasons. I mean, it's not even the COVID reason, but what we've given people is an alternative to be able to work at home, to be able to schedule, being able to pick up their children. We've created a situation where they all of a sudden have to find a way to work-life navigate instead of work-life balance. And it's working better for them. And they don't want to come back in to a traditional setting. So we have to be open to those type of things to get the best candidates, because they're the ones that are going to be able to write their own ticket to how they join a company. Okay, let's keep going. So here are some key takeaways for you guys around culture, workplace, flexibility, and total rewards. It's really, really important for us to think about all of these things, right? So when we're building a culture, a sense of community is really important. Creating workplace flexibility. So if we're going to bring people into the office, still being flexible and not making it 100% of the time would be one way that you could think about it, have certain teams in on certain days. But it's really important to, ultimately, if you want to attract the right people, that you are creating that flexibility and making sure that they're thinking about that. Looking at total rewards is beyond dollars, right? So we really are looking for how are we addressing the whole person when we're hiring somebody. It's not just their bank accounts. It's how are you meeting their social needs? How are you helping them meet their family needs, their life needs, right? And it used to be such a different line, a hard line between work and home life. And today that line is completely blurred. So we got to get with reality around that and make sure we understand that we are dealing with the whole person. We're not just hiring an employee to do a job. Okay. So if you don't get that, you're going to always have difficulty in hiring the type of talent that you want. And then, of course, employee development. One of the things here I think is super important, because a lot of HR teams will run out and they'll build these, learning and development platforms, and they'll spend all of this money, or they'll ask for money to do that thing. Adults learn by doing. There is thousands of hours of research on this. Going to a class, sitting through a classroom situation, adults retain between 10 and 20% of what they learn. And so when I talk about employee development, I'm not talking about sending somebody to a class. I'm talking about things that actually don't cost your company a lot of money. I'm talking about creating job experiences for them, letting them do a project outside of their natural roles in the company, creating an expanded way for them to look at their own learning and development, and asking them, what is it that you want? It's not an employer's responsibility to create to develop a person. Nobody can develop another person. All right. So let's start with that. A person can only develop themselves. It's an employer's responsibility to create some avenues for them to continue growing and learning in your organization. Questions?
Not
Nathan
a
just dropped.
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Anastasia.
Okay, I was gonna say I like that. The point about what you said, like pretty much like employees have to develop themselves. Like we can give them the tools, the skills, but it's more so on them. And it's nice when you do have an employer that would take the time to help you to build on that. So I like what you said.
Yeah. I mean, I can't make you do anything, right? But what I can do is I can create an environment that allows you to do things that get you excited, that teach you, that learn, that help contribute to our business, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's our jobs as leaders in an organization, is to create that fun environment for people to want to grow in your company.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm definitely gonna need your help with creating that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
No problem.
Sonia, there was
And
a
the-
question about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Go ahead, Scott. You're just doing exactly what I was going to do. Go ahead.
There was a question about remote hires. Does it make more sense to have a set working schedule or have it be more fluid and flexible?
The answer to that question for me is it depends, right? Some businesses, because a business is in effect to address their customer needs. So just because somebody's remote doesn't mean that you don't do what you need to do to meet your customers. So, if your hours are 9 to 5, because that's when your customers need you, or good grief, we have clients whose hours are, 10 p.m. to, 3 a.m. in the morning, because that's when their customers need them. That's what you need to do with your employees. But if there's a way that you can be flexible within those hours for those people, that's always going to feel better. But you're hiring people to meet your customers' needs. So let's not put the employees in front of the customers, right? So make sure you're meeting your customer needs. Be as flexible as you can be, whether you're remote or, in the workplace or whatever. Be equal, be equitable with your employees, because it's really important that you don't create a culture of, if you're in the office, you have things, or if you're remote, you have things. You want to be fair across all of your people, but start with what your customer needs are. And that's where, when I talk about company culture, I want you to be really clear on what you need employees to do. They're here to help grow your business. So don't forget that aspect of it. Anything else?
So Sonia, a lot of our entrepreneurs are kind of brick and mortar, day-to-day operations. And a lot of times we still find it hard for entrepreneurs to find people that want to come into the office or come into some of these operations and do the hands-on work, especially since the pandemic happened, with everyone being at home and then taking different directions. And some of them have become entrepreneurs themselves and created their own business. So is there any advice, 3 key takeaways, cheat codes or whatever, to helping attract these people to come in, and even if they have something else as a job, but to come in and help work? Because a lot of times we're hiring our family members and then it doesn't necessarily work out because they're available, but how can we attract others to come in and work for us?
One of the things I've seen, that's a great question, Sean, thanks for that. One of the things that I am seeing more and more of is, if you can, not everybody can, but one of the things you could do is create a college recruiting program. So people who are new to the workforce, because what I always tell managers is, if you can, and you don't need somebody that's very, very skilled, then always hire for fit, cultural fit, and you can teach the skills. So that's kind of the first thing. I actually just talked to a CEO. We're doing an acquisition for one of our companies, and the CEO and I had a good discussion last week about why his salary ranges are so low. And it's in California. So I couldn't, I was trying to get my head around that. And he hires people that are right out of school. And he's decided, he tried to hire more senior people. It takes a little longer to get them to ramp up, but because he wants them in the office. So that's the third part. And so he's hiring them right out of school. He's teaching them what they need to know. And that way it's becoming, they're more loyal. And he's giving them the expectations right out of the bat that you're going to be in the office, and they're buying into it. So I think, again, setting the expectations from the beginning is really important. The other thing is, here's where an office culture becomes really important, right? You're going to have your job is in the office. It's not going to be, remote, or it's in the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week, and you can work remotely 1 day a week, like whatever your business can handle. So set those expectations, but then create a good office culture, right? And oh, by the way, when you're in the office, we bring in lunch 2 days a week, or we have snacks available for you, or, I don't know, other rewards, that we can give people when they're in a work place. But you have to be creative today, because to your point, Deshawn, it's really hard to get people to come in today. And it is more important for us to hire right and then train well.
Thank you for that.
Okay, should I keep going, or are there any more questions on this one?
I'll keep going.
Okay, I'm almost done. Oh, sorry, so it's a lot more, it's a lot more than just retaining. You've got to train, motivate, reward, and promote people into an organization. So one of the things that I always recommend, if you have enough people to ask this survey to, and if you're having turnover, is do recognize, and I've said this a lot of different ways during this presentation, is one size does not fit all. Having one process, one set of guidelines does not work for everybody. So ask people. I mean, it's really important to ask the question. Somehow it seems that we're afraid to ask people what it is they want. And you can tell them up front, I might not be able to do everything you want me to do, but what are the things I can do to make this a better environment? Deshawn, for these entrepreneurs who have employees that are coming in, ask them, what keeps you at our company? And I just gave you, this is an actual survey that I did at Cadence Design Systems. We were having a huge turnover issue. We were literally losing about 35% of our engineers, and Cadence at that time was about 6,000 people. All right. So it wasn't a happy place to work. We were paying above market in Silicon Valley and across the globe, and people were still leaving. And so when I came in there as their global head of human resources, I was like, holy smokes, what am I going to do about this? This is very expensive. And so I just put this literal four question survey out there, and we changed the way that we treated people, the way we trained managers. We did a lot of stuff based on these 4 questions. So ask people what they want and give people choices. I see a lot of things in the chat all of a sudden. Is there anything I need to answer, or shall I keep going?
Yeah, there was a question from Nastasia. It says, I just hired an admin assistant. I'm struggling with trying to train her while working remotely. Although there is so many things I need assistance with, I need help with developing a training plan for an admin assistant. Does Trivium help with this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We would be happy to help you, Nastasia, with that. That is something that we do. We do lots of training remotely, and we do lots of support to help people with specific jobs that need to be done remotely. So yeah, just get in touch with us afterwards, and Scott will direct you to the right person. It'll probably be me, but may not be. But yeah, we can definitely help you do that. And it's a good thing that you're asking, because again, like we said, hiring is hard. And if you found somebody you like, let's make sure we can get them as effective for you as possible.
Sonia, and I think we have like one slide left, but we're about a couple minutes done here so we can finish up and Deshaun can close this out.
Yep, there we go. So, based on some of the stuff you learned here, I never want to walk away from a training without you having an action item. All right. Really, really important. You're here, you've taken this hour, you've spent your brain cells today listening to me. I really want you to think about what you're going to do to move to action based on the things that we've talked about today. And this is, I want you to think, this is my favorite model when it comes to driving change, and also doing an after action review when you've had a project that happens. So please feel free to use this. This is actually called an after action review. And so, yeah, I want you to think in terms of what are you going to stop doing based on what you learned today? What are you going to start doing based on what you learned today? And what are you going to continue doing? It's really important for you to think in terms of what are you going to do differently after the information that you've gained, and how do you think that's going to impact your organization? So I'm going to stop there and let you guys ask any other questions that you might have.
But a quick round of applause for Sonia and giving her time today. Thank you very much.
We almost didn't want you to stop.
You guys are sweet. Thank you.
That's great. Nathan, I saw put Sonia and I's email into the chat room. Thanks for doing that, Nathan. And then Deshaun and Scale Up people have our contact info as well. So we're happy to help if you want to talk to us later. That's it for us. Thanks for listening. Deshaun, if you want to close out for Scale Up, and then we'll be good.
Yeah, I know you all have to get back to lunch get back to work in about 45 seconds. So thank you all for this. Sonia, Scott, Nathan, appreciate it. As well as to our team. Remember to follow us on some of the social media platforms, as well as getting more information from our website on events that are coming up, on our accelerator programs, and about being a member of Scale Up and getting these opportunities to come toward you. So we thank you. We appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Well,
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.